On March 31st, OpenAI added a million new users in just 1 hour. After the tweet, the number made headlines and for good reason. But what struck us more than the scale was the signal. A huge portion of these users came from India, which, according to OpenAI, is now their second largest market. Not San Francisco, not London, India. And that tells us something important. The center of gravity is shifting, not just in terms of where AI is being used, but where it's being claimed. It's easy to think of AI as something abstract, fast moving, but just somehow somewhere over there. But this moment is showing us otherwise. We are truly in the beginning of 2025, living through a transformation that is being shaped by three forces: pace, place, and possibility. The pace is unlike anything any of us have ever experienced before or were even trained to be able to manage and comprehend, let alone respond to. The place is no longer centralized. This is global, distributed, and often driven by people and communities who historically have been left out of the conversation. And the possibility, what we choose to build, how we use these tools, and who gets to lead depends entirely on the decisions we're making now and the values that drive those choices. So while the news cycle focuses on product features and power struggles, the deeper story is this: intelligence is scaling fast. And the future isn't going to arrive in one dramatic moment. It's already unfolding in new markets, in unexpected communities, and through patterns most people aren't even paying attention to. And the real question that we want to talk to you about today is, are we ready to lead in a moment like that?
How do you navigate change? It's a question we think about often, and one that today's world expects us to be comfortable with. The challenge, however, is, where do you begin? And how do you develop the mindset and skills to be successful? You're listening to Designing Schools, and I'm your host, Dr. Sabba Kidwai, educator, researcher, and storyteller. Join me each week for stories and strategies that bridge the gap between research and practice, as together we explore, how might we design schools?
Stefan, your brain is probably the only one I know who can keep up with this rate of change. Tell us what you're seeing.
Thanks for saying that, but I'm starting to find it difficult. Things are just moving so quickly. And I actually heard maybe 6 or 8 months ago, a person I'm going to reference here, Dr. Ben Goertzel, saying that people, they're not used to dealing with rates of exponential change. They're used to dealing with rates of linear change. So it's very difficult. And just a few weeks ago, he put out an update. Basically, he's the founder of Singularity Net. And some people actually credit him with originally coining the term AGI, though a lot of times now people say it was Shane Legg at DeepMind, but there's disagreements. But he's a famous mathematician and he's certainly one of the leaders in AGI. He has his own decentralized lab, and it's not one of the big labs, but he's a pretty famous person in AGI and AI circles. And so he updated the world. And a lot of people are asking me about DeepSeek. And he said two important things. One is that it's difficult for people to comprehend, because he said that they use some cool little tricks, a lot of reinforcement learning. He calls them clever. When he thinks something's really smart, he says clever. So if I ever met him and he called me clever, I feel very flattered. But what he said is that both at the time of training and at the time of inference is when you get your result. It's basically 10 times as fast. So he said it's not a new thing, a new approach to getting to AGI. It's just a huge efficiency gain. But he said it's astronomical, a 10x. We talk about 10x a lot. It's really an exponential gain. It's not a linear gain. And the second thing he said is that as we get closer to AGI, we should expect more and more of these things to just see huge gains. Maybe hopefully we'll have something that, like a new kind of invention, so to speak, a new approach, right? Beyond this language model for prediction type thing, or some of the stuff that Meta is working on with Leanne LeCun. Maybe some of these things will all pan out. We'll have another breakthrough like the transformer. But he said, regardless, we're going to see exponential growth. And if you just look, and it's hard, he could quantify that as a mathematician, looking, because it was DeepSeek's an open source model. He could say it was 10x, and we can't already always see things at 10x. But I think a lot of people, when they saw the images that were produced by the ChatGPT, I think it was 4.0. They have all these other different models, but it's 4.0. You're like, wow, that is a major improvement over any other image I've seen. Whereas you could see Midjourney or Ideogram, things were gradually getting better, maybe in a linear or quasi-linear way, but you're like, wow, this is just mind-blowing. And then the integration of the text, the multimodality of it behind that. I also saw, we can link this in, KFC, I think somebody just did it to demonstrate it, but they made an AI commercial for KFC. And all they did was use common things that anyone can do, like Runway, Suno, some image generators. And they said the person paid less than $400 to do this. But it wasn't just to produce the video. There was all the subscriptions totally you can obviously use for other things, right? Because they're just using all these $20 a month subscriptions. And if this commercial was on TV, it would probably get a lot of people to go to KFC. So that's another example. In coding this week, people have been using Cursor, but you still need to know how to code a little bit. There's a new thing called Bold, where I guess I haven't tried it yet, but you don't really need to know to code at all. Meta's releasing new glasses. They're going to come out this year. They cost like $1,000, but everything's right in front of you. And then the year after, they're going to add one so you're playing like a sport. They can help you while you're kind of like, remember, see, you're younger than me, but remember that when I was a kid, there was a Bionic Man. He had all these additional sci-fi enhancements to him, and maybe the glasses are a bit bionic. So it's hard to quantify these as 10x, but that's why I think it's a little hard to keep up, because there's just so many things every day. They're now either just substantial improvements or material changes within an application, not necessarily closer to AGI. But, DeepMind released a paper that says AGI by 2030 is plausible. And what they define that as being smarter, at least as smarter than 99% of the people on Earth combined. So it's impressive just to be smarter than one of those people, but all those people combined. So we're just seeing this really fast rate of change.
We definitely are. And for that reason, OpenAI and Anthropic have decided to really go after and start supporting a new group by launching higher ed initiatives. So Anthropic went first last week for who does Claude at exactly, I think it was Wednesday morning. And OpenAI followed right after on Thursday morning. And basically, both of them, like I said, launched these higher ed initiatives. But what was really interesting was on the last episode of Diary of a CEO, he interviewed Evan Spiegel, who's the founder of Snapchat. And I don't know how many people remember this, but now we see stories across all different platforms on Instagram stories, TikTok stories, and whatnot. But it really was Snapchat that created that idea of those ephemeral stories that you do. And I know personally for me, it built my comfort on video. Everyone used to use those. And before you knew it, it was in Meta, it was in TikTok, and now it's everywhere. So one of the questions that Steve Bartlett asks Evan Spiegel is, what is it like to constantly have your product being copied? And so his advice was, you can't build a great company by chasing originality alone. You build it by staying grounded in your values, by doing the hard work, often quiet work of designing better experiences again and again. And that's just what this moment, I think, in education feels like when we think about AI. But let's go back to the OpenAI and Anthropic, because we saw those headlines, but really beneath those headlines of OpenAI and Anthropic both launching these initiatives in higher ed is this competition to shape how the next generation learns, with each company, I think, really racing to become the default AI tool. I think somebody said it the other day, if you're using ChatGPT, but another product comes along, what is it actually going to take for somebody to really shift, right? I mean, would you?
Right. And I saw that too, right? And if you think about kind of internet searching, that's really how we basically probably ended up with Google. And I think it was 90% of searches with a few people using Bing and still using the Yahoo search. You just get used to using this one thing, you're comfortable with it. And I actually saw another news story that said the CEO of Google, like Pichai, right? He said he was called all hands on deck, right? Meeting. And he's like, ChatGPT is becoming associated with AI the same way we became associated with search. And look, all these technologies are really getting to the point where they're somewhat similar, right? And they can all do a lot. So yeah, I kind of default keep using ChatGPT, sometimes a bit of Claude, but usually it's because if I go to another one, it's because, oh, I didn't really get what I wanted with ChatGPT, or maybe I was experimenting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel for most people, ChatGPT is definitely the default. Okay, so let's unpack what both companies announced and why it matters for what we're now calling the class of AGI. For example, when I graduated my doctorate, I was class of 2020.
Right.
You'd be class of 2018. There's a class for every year. But one thing that every single graduating year now have in common, despite whatever year they're graduating, is they are all going to be class of AGI, meaning they are walking into a world where AGI will be part of how they work, how they learn, and just how they live. All right, so let's go ahead and start with Anthropic. This was really their first big move into education. It definitely wasn't small. They launched Claude for Education, and they announced partnerships with Northeastern, LSE, London School of Economics, and Champlain College. And they also integrated with platforms like Canvas. But what kind of stood out to me wasn't the logos and the people they were partnering with. It was really the philosophy that they were bringing, which I think Anthropic now have really become known for, having those values really guide what they're trying to do. So at the center of their rollout was this new feature called Learning Mode, which basically is that shift from don't just give kids the answers, help guide them through the thinking process. It's kind of a Socratic approach, asking questions like, how would you approach this? Or what evidence supports your conclusion? And the goal is really that this is going to help students strengthen their reasoning and problem solving skills, both skills that we're also seeing developed in AI as well, not just the results and outcomes that they're getting. But they didn't stop there. Anthropic also introduced a campus ambassadors program. This is actually very similar to what Apple did. Apple have an amazing campus ambassador program where there's just so many incredible things that happen as a result of it. And so they did something similar. A lot of people do campus ambassador programs. It's not really something new, but it's really great to build community. And they gave students API credit grants for projects they are working on. And so what I really loved about this is not only are you using the Socratic method to guide through reasoning and problem solving, but it's also this, what can you build? How can you build? And even just planting that seed in their heads, right, for what it is they can build. This is a really, really, really strong signal that they're not just saying, hey, we want college students using our product, but like they're investing in student agency and innovation and helping them be part of the future and really encouraging them to co-create with AI so that they can actually shape how it's being used in the future. Now, next we have OpenAI. Unlike Anthropic, OpenAI has been doing a lot in the education space, especially higher education, for about a year now. They launched ChatGPT EDU in May 2024 and have slowly been expanding. They partnered recently with California State University, and there's just a couple other places, many other places actually as well. And this week, they took a much more direct approach after Anthropic made that announcement by announcing that ChatGPT Plus, which is about $20 a month with the deep research, voice capabilities, all those things, is going to be free for all US and Canadian college students through May. And their message, we're here to help you through finals. And this probably isn't just a final season perk. I think they're probably going to do something moving forward. But showing up really when students are overwhelmed, and I think also giving students a taste, right? If you're studying for finals and you've just been using the free version and now you got handed a paid version, it is going to feel very, very different. And what I actually really love and appreciate, and I know there's good and bad to these companies. I know people have all kinds of opinions, but one thing I have continuously really appreciated is the amount of education and just writing and information giving they are really doing to really help mobilize people in multiple modalities. It's not just, oh, here's a blog post. It's no, here's videos, here's webinars, here's community events. They're doing so much. And this week, they also announced the launch of OpenAI Academy. This is an initiative designed to support developers and mission-driven organizations around the world, especially, they said, in low and middle income countries. The Academy offers training and mentorship from OpenAI experts, 1 million in API credits to help developers build and deploy tools, and contests and incubators, workshops, all other kinds of things across a variety of different industries. So this is actually, I think, also really awesome. Like if you're a student, not even in college, but even just in high school, being able to go and watch a workshop on AI in healthcare or AI in finance is going to give you such insight into how things are changing and what's happening and things like that. And so I think this is OpenAI's long-term bet. The future of AI is definitely not going to be shaped in just Silicon Valley alone, but by students, by builders, by organizations, and really people globally across the world who are looking to solve real problems in their own communities, which I must say is why design thinking is really helpful, because design thinking is what is going to help you unlock those ideas. So this is just a little bit of the difference in approaches, but they are both really going in to support that higher ed demographic. Both companies are investing in AI literacy, just in completely different ways. But one of the things that I think we should be very clear on is that the kind of literacy they're really championing isn't just, hey, here's a prompt library. That is not what they came and gave students. It's really about how do you think with AI, how do you work with AI, and how do you lead with AI, really going back to that concept that I talk about all the time, which is AI is your teammate. And this is, again, like I said, this is design thinking. If you're going to want to work and think and lead alongside these intelligent systems, you are going to need to have both methods and mindsets that all come from design thinking. And so if today's students are going to stay competitive, they don't just need access to AI or here's how to prompt, which of course is so, that's the basics of communication. But we have to get beyond that, I think, as well. And so they really need experiences and projects and things that they can showcase that are going to prepare them to show how they collaborate with AI, how they delegate, design, and make decisions. And it goes back to, I remember we shared a couple episodes ago that quote from the COO of LinkedIn when he was like, every person in 2025 should be able to answer this interview question. Tell me a story about how you're using AI at work or at home, or in the case of a student at school.
To pick up on that, I heard another story from someone who does interviews, and they said the breaking question for me is I asked them, tell me something you've learned in the last month. And if they can't tell me something they've learned in the last month, I know there's no way they're going to succeed in this company because the world's kind of completely changing. You can't just say, I'm going to learn once a year, or when we have employee training and we see that the world's changing, right? With AI. Okay, you need to learn about AI. That's one example. And there's also things that the tools are right there to help you learn. And it's really interesting. It's almost a little difficult for me to articulate, but it's because AI is so powerful, right? And it is a general intelligence. It's the same product that can help you build your business, can teach you about how to use it to help you build your business or how to use it. It's like the same product can help you as your therapist and also like your salesperson, right? And your graphic designer. Imagine having this one super powered agent. But the other thing, that really strikes me is that they're really stepping up. They're the ones that really kind of stepping up and saying, okay, we need to help kids learn about this because I think the AI and the companies, they're not arguing with themselves about whether or not students should learn about AI. Whereas we see a lot of schools, both in K-12 and higher ed, in some pockets are actually still debating whether or not the students should learn about AI, not how to do it the best. Of course, there's debates about how to best instruct students, like where's this balance? How do you integrate it, right? These can be more complicated questions, but they're not, hey, should we do this? They're like, here's the opportunity. I was telling my friend on the other day, it seems that when the Anthropic came out, I said, oh, it seems every university is going to have an AI partner. Like you mentioned, OpenAI out here in California and Anthropic with CSC, and we've seen Boodlebox do things. It makes sense because every university, every really educational institution, they're really about developing intelligence. So when there's borderline free or incredibly inexpensive intelligence that you can add to your learning institution, you should add that. And if you don't, I don't understand conceptually how your learning institution isn't behind. If somebody gave you $50 million and they said, oh, this college, you can go out and you can hire any of the people you want. You pay them whatever you want. Just bring in a bunch of really smart people here to help the students learn, to improve the university. And you're like, no, we're good. We're good. We don't need that. Because I get like when you say no, you're not going to add intelligence to a school. Where do you add it? Everyone thinks it's so controversial. We're only going to add intelligence to the military. We're only going to add intelligence to the government. We're only going to add intelligence to the biggest businesses in the world. We're not going to add it to education. That's just so counterintuitive to me. So I'm glad to see them step up. I think now the next thing has to be is how do you help students? And this is where the human part is important. This is where I think that universities, professors, teachers that have connections to the students could help. How do you help the students sort through all this, right? Imagine you're like, I couldn't even answer the question. Should I use the Claude or should I use the ChatGPT or, what, right? That's where they need the guidance. That's where they need the support.
They don't just need traffic lights.
You can use your paper. You can use Claude in this way in your paper, and then you can use ChatGPT in the other one. I think it needs support for talking through these ideas that it's free or very low cost intelligence, that it's going to be part of your future, that this is important to you, that there are values and ethical issues that you consider more and more in my mind about how it's used and how much energy is used. But I think all these things are very important. The other thing I want to say is you mentioned India, and I forget where this came from, but I had this idea, but somebody articulated it better than me. I was like, people were saying, even early on when it hallucinated like a lot, ChatGPT 3.5, and it wasn't great. For some students, they don't have anything. And I was thinking of some kids in the developing world, there's no alternative teacher for them to go to. Yeah, you're right. There's a lot of places where they don't have it. So to me, it was already better than the best available human to a lot of people. And now it's getting a lot better. So I think that's why you're starting to see it rise in India. I clicked on an article that I also thought was interesting. It made me think about it with the energy. It said that in places where there's not a lot of bandwidth, and it was talking about poor countries in Africa, that actually when kids search on the internet, it takes a lot of energy and it's really slow. Whereas ChatGPT and these things, because they're really right now just processing text, unless you're using the voice interactions, that it's a very efficient way to deliver information and it makes the information more accessible. And we don't think about that. Matt, if like if the internet goes out at home for 10 minutes or it's slow. Oh my gosh, so slow right now. We can barely, and they're on some kind of dial up system or something that's 2G. Right. So we don't really appreciate for them. It's just, wow, getting access to some knowledge and getting access to information. And now it's guided through these. So I think it's wonderful to step up. I think that they're important roles for human led, human organized education because you're interacting with other humans. Right. And the humans need to think about how to incorporate these other forms of intelligence. But I feel, though, however, I think some humans think that, well, gee, if we don't incorporate the intelligence at our school, then we'll just have the humans. And I think the opposite is going to happen. I think educational institutions, professors and teachers that continue to resist the AI, what's going to happen is that the students are going to choose the AI because they're going to think, I can get this done a lot faster. It's actually really good. I can use it 24/7. It can explain things to me in the way I want to explain them. I don't need to get 100 on the test, but even if it hallucinates a couple times, I'll still get a 96. So I think that people aren't seeing that the resistance is hurting themselves. And I think that the table needs to change if people want to maintain their relevance.
Absolutely. It got me even thinking a lot about how I remember Anna Mills. We need AI detection now so we can watch where the student, like eye tracking. She said,
Yeah,
it's just like, that is so creepy. And so I think it's also really interesting to see these companies, how they're showing up with support through videos, through
yeah.
case studies, through workshops, through Socratic type interactions. And then when you look at how people are showing up, it's like, well, we're just going to Blue Books or we want eye scanners and we like these really creepy things. And so I think that's a really important part because I always go back to how people really take this concept of a relationship with your students for granted. A relationship is in no scenario is really by default. It's really the time and the investment and effort, right? That you put in, not just once, but on a day-to-day continuous basis. So I think that's a really important point that you bring up that there are a lot of people worried about their jobs, but so much of that can really be in your control. I think especially for educators, who
Right.
doesn't need a coach or a mentor,
Right.
right? No matter what level of executive leadership you reach, every single person wants a coach and a mentor. And so I think if you can be that person, it's going to be amazing. And speaking of why this really matters, and I think for these companies as well, why this really matters is we are seeing more and more companies begin to share their plans around AI agents. And we talk a lot about AI as a teammate. I think it's a friendlier term,
Yeah.
but sort of in the enterprise space, you're going to hear agents a lot more, which are just basically digital workers. And we're starting to see more and more people introduce their digital workers. And more than that, their organizational plans for the digital workers, like where they fit into the org charts, what roles and responsibilities are they being given, and things along those lines, which I break down for everybody in chapter 21 of my book, which is the HIRE acronym. It's a framework for how to actually bring on board and think about the role digital employees will play in your workplace or organization if you're a school. So last week, the one that really caught my eye was Deloitte. They launched something called Zora AI, a new agentic platform that's built on NVIDIA's infrastructure. And this is not just another productivity tool. It is a group of digital workers, their coworkers, they're telling them, that they said are showing up in day-to-day workflows. They are scanning contracts, flagging risks, forecasting budgets, and even negotiating supplier terms all automatically. And Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA, said in one of his keynotes, AI agents turn data into action, which is a huge gap when we look at people and organizations. And I think that's the really big shift that you have to think about when it comes to partnership and collaboration with these digital workers. Whose strengths are where and what is each person going to do and really own as part of the process instead of competing. So Zora AI doesn't just answer questions, it acts. It qualifies vendors, analyzes ESG compliance, suggests alternatives when supply chains break. I mean, it's doing so many different things. And this is kind of what enterprise agility starts to look like when you have more powerful tools powered by AI going towards this AGI and whatnot. And it's really going to be a huge turning point that it's just going to turn organizations upside down. The work that used to require 3 teams and a spreadsheet now can be done with this digital worker and maybe one human oversight. And I think it was last week we talked about the study from Harvard and Wharton with Procter and Gamble, where one human with an AI was the equivalent of 2 people with no AI. This is a big, big, big thing people should start processing. Because I always say it's not 100% here yet. So right now, I feel like people have a 2-year window. You have a 2-year window to process, to think, to really organize, and not just default to whatever tool it is you're using and just be happy and just stay there and think, okay, I've checked the box. but be okay, we've got step one, but now let me have a breather. People are starting to get comfortable. They've taken their steps one, they're being prompting, they're using some of these tools. We've overcome that fear. We're moving forward. What is coming next? And really use this time strategically. And the more we help people really step into those roles, more human strategy, creativity, human judgment, and decision making, these are all things that are going to become even more important, not less important. Because there's one thing we know about AI agents, they need human oversight. This is going to be incredibly important. I always say overnight, every single person in an organization, a school, a student, every individual really in society has now become a leader. It is your responsibility to lead and manage these AI little digital workers that are being unleashed everywhere. And being able to step into those roles, that is really the tension. Agentic AI is now starting to be shared, deployed. We're starting to hear more and more stories. And it really is, I think, the moment to look at how do you adapt your workflow and how do you rethink your role? So if you are not training your people in how to lead with AI and how to be leaders at the AI teams, I think it's going to be hard down the line. So why make it harder? Why not invest and do that work now? And if you're a student, these aren't just tools in front of you. These are literally your coworkers that you are going to be working with.
Yeah, just the one thing I would add, I saw a story somebody posted that somebody used agents to do fundraising, and they were just a basic Claude, the OpenAI operator, and they started posting on LinkedIn, oh, contribute to my cause. And a couple of things struck me. I was like, wow, a huge fraud risk, right? So how are we going to identify what's legit or what's not? And then I used to work for a nonprofit, and when you do fundraising, and you would post these things, get your friends to post, oh, can you post on LinkedIn? So that. And I'm sitting there thinking, okay, we could all be sitting around doing that. But if we had the agents do it, they would already have gone over all the social media space, done it 100 times, maybe even presented it in different ways, targeted towards users. And they would have sucked up all the donations on Super Donation Tuesday before we even got around to posting our same thing, right? So we often think about the agents as maybe something nice additional or something that would give a corporate an advantage. But somebody who can use these, it's really challenging. And then beyond the general operator type things that we're seeing at the frontier models, there's some companies that are just agent companies. And I saw one that was basically the same thing like your secretary. Oh, like call so-and-so, call Sally, then call Joe, get their two opinions, and then write them up and send them to me. Okay, so somebody doing that, they'll probably take them like an hour, right? You have the AIs do it. They make both the calls at the same time. They collaborate the document. They ship it over maybe 10 or 15 minutes. There's questions of how well you can use it, which is going to set some people apart from others. But questions of not using it at all, I mean, you just take anything, right? Let's just think about what that means for university recruiting or trying to get students or employee recruiting or product promotion, or we talked about donations or sustaining client support because it's getting all that interaction when you have to do it. It just seems to me a lot of these things are going to probably make or break businesses. In some ways, they're not really even going to know. Some companies just going to be like, oh, wow, my sales really went down this quarter. What happened? And they're not going to realize it's because their other competitors just constantly have agents. And some are still funny. I got a LinkedIn thing. It said like, oh, I represent so-and-so. We provide AI agents to these companies. I said, oh, you're a great agent. You're a great like AI agent. And then she said, oh, thank you very much. And then I never heard from her again. There's a female on LinkedIn. And then just the other day, she followed up like, oh, we haven't been in touch for a while. You still interested in the AI agent? And I was just, oh, you're a great AI agent. But a lot of people, they're not going to know, right? I'm a little more aware. And of course, I laugh with you. Yes, thank you very much. But there's almost no cost, right? If you're a person and I want your business, and I keep harassing you to get the business afloat, I'm eventually going to be embarrassed myself. Like, I'm not going to ask her again. That's too awkward. But an AI agent doesn't care. An AI agent will just keep asking you until you either block it or you maybe can, because we've all finally said, okay, maybe I'll buy that thing or whatever. So persistence is important, but there's no personal blocker or inhibitor. So I think these are going to have a huge impact on the economy and maybe increasing total economic activity a lot, but more, I think, just one company out competing another.
Absolutely. I was playing with this new, I don't know how new it is, but it's a browser that has deep research in the browser, but there's an AI phone agent in the browser. And so there's this demo. If you go to Gen Spark on YouTube, you can see the whole demo where it basically is booking a travel plan. So it builds the itinerary, does all of that, but then it goes to book the restaurants. And the AI agent is the one that's calling, and it actually connects to your phone. So when you do it in the beginning, it will call your phone and do a test call. to make sure that, okay, you're an actual person and whatnot. And then after that, the whole phone call happens in the browser. And so I actually tried it and I had it start booking a hotel.
Yeah.
And the person on the other line got freaked out because the AI agent was so aggressive. It was so direct. As soon, like usually you're like, oh, hi.
Yeah.
And he was like, okay, how are you? What can I do for you? It doesn't even give people a moment. It was like, hi, I'd like to book a stay for this, and do this, this.
The
Like,
even like that computer's been up dead or whatever, right?
and so your fundraising example was really interesting. When tools like we just talked about, Zora and whatnot, are really showing us what AI can do. The next topic we want to talk to you about is how AI thinks. And this is just as important, right? Because you can't really team up with somebody you don't know. Who are you? Where'd you come from? And I think for the longest time, more and more people have really wanted to know more and more about this as well. And so Anthropic dropped a new article, a new research paper, probably maybe one of the biggest breakthroughs, and it's called Tracing the Thoughts of a Large Language Model. And again, I really appreciate it. They did a video.
Right.
It's a short YouTube video. If you don't have time to sit and read the whole thing, which I'm probably guessing they know people won't, there's a really, really, really good, well-animated video. So basically, here's the problem. Language models like Claude, ChatGPT, and whatnot don't follow code that people have written, right? They learn patterns from massive data sets, which basically means coming up with their own ways of solving problems and different results. Now, one of the things that they highlight in part of their paper is that these large language models can speak dozens of languages. They can solve math problems, write poems, but we just don't really understand how exactly it is they're doing that. So Anthropic is building basically what they call an AI microscope. You can think of it like neuroscience for machines. They're basically tracing how ideas form and travel inside Claude's quote unquote brain from the moment you ask the question to the final word that it gives back. And what they are finding is wild and just really interesting. So basically, a couple of things they say: Claude plans ahead when writing poetry, choosing rhymes before it writes the line. It can reason across languages, suggesting it might use something like universal language of thought. It sometimes gives fake explanations to agree with the user, even if the reasoning is wrong. And in moments of hallucination or jailbreak, they have been able to see the internal circuits misfiring in real time. This is absolutely unbelievable. And I expect this research will only continue to deepen and develop. But this matters because the models we are deploying into schools, businesses, and governments, like I said, these are not just tools, these are digital workers. And they're shaping decisions. And if we want to trust them, we have to be able to audit how they're working, not just the end output of what it is they are saying. And if I go back to students, because I think that's been a big theme of our episode today, this class of AGI, as we're calling them now, this is why AI literacy has to go deeper than prompt engineering. It is not enough to just know how to use an AI tool. You have to understand how it's constructed, what shapes its behavior, and where things can go wrong. Because I always think back to social media algorithms. We didn't talk, this probably might even be a good time to talk about adolescence, right? And the whole, if you haven't seen Adolescence, I think it's like a 4-part series on Netflix that looks at a 13-year-old boy who basically is accused of stabbing a classmate of his who is a young girl, and she dies. And he's arrested, and the whole story kind of unfolds about how did he come to do what he did. But a really big part of the story is that the parents didn't really know what was going on and what was happening on social media. They talk about incel culture, red pill, all these different things that kids are being exposed to. And I think it's just such a powerful example with the consequences staring us right in the face of what happens when you don't have agency over your technology because you don't know how it works. You don't realize I pressed like over here. Now this is why I'm seeing this. And I think, I can't remember her name, but I think one of the reasons we weren't really going to talk about this today, but it just came up, but I want to do a full proper episode on this. But there was a person who left Facebook. She left Facebook and she wrote a book. The book was written by Sarah Wynne Williams. She's a former Meta Director of Global Public Policy. She was basically hanging out with Mark Zuckerberg, Sheryl Sandberg. I mean, she was up there on pretty much every single trip, all the different things that were happening. And she left and wrote a book called Careless People. And it really details the allegations of sexual harassment and all these other inappropriate things that happened with the senior executives. And obviously, Meta's trying to shut it down, but have not been successful yet. So she did this interview on 60 Minutes. And one of the things that she talked about was how when you take a photo, like if a kid is taking a selfie of themselves, but they delete it, so it's not even posted, Facebook knows, Meta knows, and they take that data and they basically sell it to different companies. And they basically were saying that when you upload anything, when you do anything, there's this insane grab of these algorithms that are looking to where should the data be sold, who can buy it, and all this other stuff that's happening. And then what happens with that is, so say for example, 13-year-old girl uploads a photo, doesn't like how she looks, deletes it, maybe she's taking it a couple of times. Facebook takes that data, sells it to the beauty companies, and the beauty companies now start targeting ads towards her. I want to know how many 13-year-olds, this is such a great question to go and ask your students, even adults, how many people know I just took a selfie, deleted it, I didn't even post it, and that's why I'm now getting this ad from, let's say, Sephora for this new beauty product that I should be buying. If you understand that that's what's happening and you can't make those connections, and I think people do, right, as a joke, like, oh, we were talking about this and then I saw an ad for it. So I think people like, we get it. But I think these are things that we need to explicitly teach. And I always say we can kill two birds with one stone. We're having to teach, we should be teaching all these lessons now with AI. And there's just this really, really, really beautiful opportunity to be, okay, we didn't teach that to kids then. We can double up and teach them both things now in this moment. So if you haven't seen that documentary or read that book, I haven't read the book yet, but it is definitely on my list. And I think, again, like I was saying, this is why it matters. AI literacy has to be more than prompt libraries and prompt engineering, or we have to know how these systems work, but more importantly, our agency over how to shape them and how to be aware of what's happening as we do it. And if you haven't seen, we do have a free course available online, which looks at the WISE framework, which is basically our set of 4 guiding questions that we encourage people to integrate as part of any activity they're doing that help young people really balance innovation and integrity and really be able to make those decisions, a framework to be able to help them make those decisions. So it's free and we will link it for you below. But in a world where all of us are going to have to collaborate with these digital workers, transparency really is a non-negotiable. And so I just love what Anthropic is doing here, really looking into these circuits, telling us behind the scenes. It's not just about another research project or another research paper. This is really the beginning of trust infrastructure, right? For how we are going to better be able to know and assess and understand this new set of workers that are now going to be working with us.
Yeah. And I think it's another reason that people need to learn how to use AI. Because obviously, look, most people are going to be able to do what they've done. People have been trying to do this for years, but it takes a lot of technical expertise to say, okay, but they used an AI to study that AI to figure it out. It's going to get to the point where you're going to have an AI that creates awareness for you of all the different ways you're being marketed to. Because, yeah, we can generally teach the students how this happens, but we're going to need AIs to say, and maybe this parents come in a little bit too. Okay, I don't want my kids to see these types of things. I don't want, because the way we even approach data sharing, it's like, oh, well, all your data is going to be shared, or we're going to press this magical button and that's not going to be shared. That's not the way it's going to work. And there's hackers and all these kind of things. And people are going to need to be able to get the support of AIs to help manage their interactions with the world. Because I don't think we fully understand how digitally mediated a lot of people's realities, and especially younger people's realities. There's a Cory Booker the other day. He gave this 25-hour nonstop speech, right, in the Senate. And one of my friends is on Facebook, he's about 10 years older than me. He said, was anybody there? And people were like, it's not really clear if anybody was there. He was just giving the speech. He's like, well, what was the point of the speech if nobody was there? And I said, it had 400 million views on TikTok. Okay. And then there's some other TikTok tool I don't even know, the way you can edit the comments and stuff like that. People played with it and shared it. And it's like, you have this generation, and I think a lot of the Democrats they don't really know how to argue online. You have Elon Musk up there with a chainsaw posting 26 times a day. Political argumentation has become really performative and socially media oriented. And you have Democrats giving speeches, but at least like Cory Booker, right, performed something out of the ordinary. And then it got all these, plus it was on YouTube as well. So I think the total number of views, 500 million, right? People are watching it more overseas, only 330 million Americans. So something had 500 million views is quite a big deal. And obviously 500 million people don't fit in the Senate. This just shows you things are mediated, or you see stuff online that not in the major news, or there's all these things going on. And, people think, oh, this future, right? They see all this singularity when our minds merge with the machines. And you think, well, what do you mean? I'm going to have to put this, physically install this device into my brain? Maybe, right? They're doing that a little bit now to help people who are paralyzed, but it's more that the digital becomes an extension of you. It's because you're always on TikTok and other social media, because, you have the meta glasses on, right? Whether you call it extension of you or an extension of the AI or a merger of the two, there's different ways to conceptualize it. And I think those are some of the things we need to start talking to kids about. But it also shows you can't rely on humans to teach everything. Things are just happening so rapidly, right? These kind of things, people need awareness of it. So it's a lot of interesting stuff going on. Yeah, I found the Anthropic paper. I didn't have time to read it all in a lot of detail. It did remind me, the one thing you pointed out, that when it hallucinates, the neurons like fire in some ways. So that's one of the things I heard from Kurzweil actually a few months ago, that he said he thought they could control the hallucinations because they could alter the way the neurons fire. And I didn't really understand enough technically of what he was saying, but that came out in that paper. So we're just at the beginnings of this. I think these are exciting times to be alive, as Peter Amanda said. I should be motivated. He has this thing. He always tries to sell this biome thing, but he's a little bit old. He's like 63 and his kids are like 13. So he had his kids later in life and he's like, oh yeah, it's an exciting time to be alive. I have these young kids. I have AI.
These are exciting times, exciting and scary. I always say, if you're not scared about what's happening now, especially if you're in the United States, right? We have way too many things coming at us all at once from so many different areas, so much disruption on every level. I always say, if you're not feeling afraid, you don't understand what's happening right now. But I think what's really important is to be able to have the tools, the mindsets, the methods, going to go back to design thinking, to be able to balance that fear with optimism and a sense of action and a bias towards being able to have agency. Yes, we could be afraid, but that doesn't mean it should paralyze us. We should still be able to act, make decisions, and really design our futures, not only for ourselves, but for people in our communities and those that we serve as well. So the next topic we want to talk about is how ChatGPT passed the Turing test, apparently. So in 1950, if you haven't heard, Alan Turing proposed this radical question, which was, can machines think? His test, which is now really famous, wasn't about logic or math. It was about conversation. He said if a computer could hold its own in a text exchange without being detected as a machine, it might just be intelligent. And we said, hold that thought on voices, because voices are going to play a huge role here. So last week, researchers announced that OpenAI's ChatGPT 4.5 has passed that test, and not by a small margin. I mean, it really brought it. So in a control study with nearly 300 participants, ChatGPT 4.5 was judged to be human 73% of the time when it adopted a persona. That is more often than the actual humans in the test. And one of the biggest things they said that attributed to that was voice and personality. Honestly, I personally find them creepy. But one of the voices that just came out was Monday from ChatGPT, which kind of has this Monday vibe to it and how it talks. Very creepy. And another one was a Sesame, which I think we talked about last week, right? Yeah, and I think we played it. So Sesame is the other one with Miles and Maya, I think it is. So I need to say that again, okay? 73% of the time when ChatGPT adopted a persona, people thought it was human, and that is more than the actual humans in the test. So basically, people thought AI was more human than the actual humans that were there. So the results really show just how far these large language models have come and how quickly, but it also really forces us to ask and really confront something more personal. What does it mean when a machine can sound like us, act like us, and substitute for us in everyday interactions? This is no longer hypothetical, right? You just shared the example earlier of the AI agent totally contacted you. If you go to GenSpark, you yourself can go and have an AI agent call and do this as well. So it's already happening. It's happening in so many places, in hiring calls, support chats, classroom forums, political campaigns. And here's where this all connects back, right, to what it is that we're really hoping to be able to share as a message today, as a takeaway. And that is, if AI can play the part of a teammate, this digital worker, young people need more than just digital skills and digital citizenship. They need discernment, identity, voice, decision making. We really, really, really need to double down on the things that machines cannot mimic, or that we don't want machines for, because we need the humans to be the ones to take the lead in this area. So the real question is, how are we going to do this? When are we going to do this? Hopefully sooner rather than later. We will link some resources down for you below. And also take a moment to share that if you and your leadership team are interested in having a more personalized conversation, we introduced something recently called the AI Power Circle. And this is basically where you and your leadership team, we basically join a few of your meetings, and each meeting over about the course of 3 to 6 months, we work with you to talk about these topics, learn about these topics. So let's say, because at this point, I feel I need to accept so many people who adopted Magic School. And even if that's something you've done and adopted, it is not going to be your last step. And I always hear from people, well, that was our step one, and that, but I don't ever see enough people step 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And these technologies are racing ahead. And so if that is something that interests you and your team as you think about making decisions, you want to have a more personalized conversation to you and your organization, reach out, and we would love to be able to host and bring you in to create something like this for you.
Yeah, that would be wonderful. And, I think it's important and really I think really to me, there's two approaches. Use AI to our charge the way we do school now. That's approach number one. Approach number two is think about all the different ways that we prepare or should be starting to think about preparing kids for an AI and technologically accelerated world. And is there some overlap? Of course, yes. We still need to teach some of the stuff in school that we teach now, and teaching it with AI, like that can be helpful, and that'll help prepare kids to the AI world. But everything in bucket one is not going to cut it. Borderline supercharging the status quo is only desirable if the status quo is good or is all that's needed. So to me, I think schools are constantly doubling down about how to strengthen the status quo, whether they're using AI or they're just hiring some other people to help them do it better, or they're thinking about different ways to teach, or they're trying to hide the kids' cell phone so they pay more attention in class, or they come up with a new textbook, right? There's all these things are all just about the status quo. And to me, it's when you look at the grand scheme of what's going on in schools, thinking about these bigger pictures, it seems to me is about 1%, or it's a sideshow. Oh, we have a robotics club. Okay. That's like saying that you have a biology club after school and kids don't learn about biology. So I think huge changes are coming, and these changes overlap. I think one thing people aren't seeing is that, because a lot of people say, well, we're bound by the current curriculum because all these regulations, that stuff's all going to fade. We already lost the NAEP. They cut all the funding for the National Assessment of Educational Progress. So all these funding kind of restraints are going to go away. So I think schools should think about challenging. And I don't know, when I was driving the other day, I thought it may just take a younger generation, because the way schools work, it tends to be older people who generally becomes like a superintendent, like someone in their 50s. They're the best at doing the way things have been done. And they're 5 years from retirement. They're going to really disrupt the status quo, right? Or is it a young founder that really disrupts? And I'd like it to be more of the quote unquote older people who could transform from within. But I think we're more likely to see a transformation from without. And I've pointed that out in a couple of links, and a couple of us think, oh, AI hasn't transformed school. Yes, not from within. It's not going to transform. No, I don't think anymore from within. I think the transformation will come from the outside, which will create some downsides. If schools really get undermined, that's going to hurt a lot of kids. But I see that absence of more serious action, I think that's the way it'll go. But reach out to us because we'd like to help.
It's your turn to join the conversation by sharing what you enjoyed or what questions you have. In a world where time and attention are so valuable, thank you for choosing to listen and for being a part of our Designing Schools community. Leaving a review for the podcast helps others learn about the show, giving them the gift of knowledge and allowing this community to help create access and exposure to ideas and opportunities others may not even know exist.